Today is Friday, February 21st, 2025, and we welcome you to the Chapter 49 podcast. Chapter 49 represents most IRS employees in the state of Indiana. My name is Larry Lannan. I'm a volunteer and a retiree for Chapter 49, just doing some communications work on a volunteer basis. And we once again welcome our chapter president, Duncan Giles.
Thanks, Larry. As always, it's good to be here.
Well, it's good to be here, you and I. We usually start off our podcast with something light, talk about the weather, just talk about our families and things that are going on. We're not going to do that today because at the IRS, some very difficult times are here. We want to make sure people understand what's going on. We want people to understand what NTEU is doing. We're doing everything we can. We'll give you a full update on that in just a moment. But where I'd like to start, Duncan, is with this. This is a difficult time. I mean, emotions are running high, and obviously for those people who have received the notices of termination, the way that was done, that was not a pleasant experience for anyone. And it's also seeping into others, the fact that not only the people who are being terminated are being impacted, but the people who know the people who are being terminated, who are their partners in arms, or people who are working with them in the federal government, and for them to all of a sudden just be gone, that is not an easy thing to deal with. So what I would like to start off with, Duncan, is just give people a little advice during a difficult time like this. Any words of wisdom about how we handle it, whether you're directly or indirectly impacted by the termination of the probationary employees, at least most of them?
Yeah, right now, and I've been meeting and talking to a lot of them in the state of Indiana. It's been a gut-wrenching time absolutely for them, because a lot of them have moved or done things with families, things of that nature, left good-paying jobs to come to federal government service, and now to have it yanked out from them, supposedly in the best interest of the service, and because of their performance, and neither one of those are remotely true, is just, not only is it financially crushing, but emotionally too. Because, and every single one that I've talked to was like, you had nothing to do with this. This is not your fault. Do not blame yourself. And this message is from the highest levels of the IRS down to me. This is stuff that their managers were saying, and it was very emotional for managers that had to deliver these messages, OJIs who are working with these probationary employees, just everyone. It's just been a horrific experience to watch these people, these great ladies and gentlemen that have worked hard. It's not easy to get into the federal government. There are so many hoops you have to jump through. They did it all. They worked through those. They waited, got their temporary job offers, waited for firm job offers, and then to have this, just on a, for lack of a better term, a political whim. And one of the things I emphasize them and want to make sure that all our viewers know is this did not come from the IRS. There is nobody in the IRS that wanted this. This came from levels higher than above. And so, it's just heartbreaking. And they still have the ability to reach out to EAP, our employee assistance program, to get help with counseling. And I've advised several employees to do that. And I would advise, other employees that are impacted, as you said, to also talk to folks if they feel the need to, because like I said, this is heartbreaking for a lot of us.
So Duncan, now that we've talked about that, and that's a very important part of this, what are these people facing now? I think before I start that, we have a lot of people who watch this podcast who are in and out of government. Just as a basic lesson here, explain, if you can, who is a probationary employee at an agency like the IRS?
In an agency at the IRS, a probationary employee is someone who is in their first year of working, basically from the first day they start until a year. And a probationary period is just that. They want to, we want to make sure it's a good fit for the agency, it's a good fit for the employee to see how everything meshes. Are they progressing? Are they learning? The three reasons you should be let go of during a probationary period are, if the performance isn't there, in other words, they're not quite catching on, if there is a conduct issue, that they are not behaving correctly in the workplace or with taxpayers or whoever it might be, or if something's come up in their background investigation, because every federal employee goes through a background investigation, if something comes up there that wasn't caught initially. But in the case of these folks that were let go yesterday across the country, and every single state was impacted. None of the case was for none of them. We have not heard from poor performers. As a matter of fact, we heard that there were a lot of very good performers. That they were getting great positive feedback from their managers, not causing any problems, no issues, and they were let go. So that's the problem that we have overall, and basically any right-thinking person would have, is there is no good reason for these people to be let go because they are all very much needed.
And we need to emphasize that that's part of the reason that NTEU is in court right now, because the law, as I understand it, you can talk more about this, is that if a probationary employee is being let go, there has to be a reason for that. It could be conduct, but I think the reason that's being given by the administration for this is that these people are not living up to their performance standards. Yet, if we look at this, do we even have evidence that all of these people are poor performers? I think that's the big issue here, is it not?
Yeah, and that's been some of the in these court cases, and NTU received a setback when we asked for a temporary restraining order to hold this, to stop this, and the judge did not grant it because there wasn't harm yet. In other words, this hadn't happened yet. And that was one of the main things that had this. But there has been zero indication. When you have a poor performer during a probationary period, it is expected that they would be let go if they were put on a plan or something of that nature and they couldn't quite do the job. But what we're hearing, and I've heard from a lot of my brethren across the country, it's uniformly, the best way I can describe this is it was a reduction in force. It was a RIF. And that has a whole different connotation than a release of a probationary employee due to the three areas that I touched on earlier. So it's just an unbelievable situation for everyone involved.
And so we talked to Doreen Greenwald, our national president, in a recent podcast, and when we talked about this, and the fact is, yes, probationary employees have fewer rights than a permanent or conditional employee, but they still have some rights, and that's why we're in court, and we are partnering with a number of other unions to put our resources together. And NTU is taking the lead because we do have a good record in our legal representation of people who work for the federal government. So bottom line, for those of you who are locked out of your IRS systems now because you're terminated, we will continue to keep you updated on our Facebook page, which you can find on Facebook just by looking under NTEU Chapter 49 Indiana. And of course, we'll at least once a week try to keep this podcast going. We're on most weeks, and we do want to update you here as well. But
yeah. One of the things I would
go
like
ahead.
to add, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I want to make sure that folks do have their information on, especially probationary, but it's important for everyone to have their personal cell phone and their personal email address on at ntu.org. And, several messages were sent out specifically for probationary employees to fill out a 5-minute survey form. So NTU had that information so we could use them in these court cases going forward. So if you have not done that, please do so. Go to ntu.org to do that.
And we've emphasized that before, and Duncan is saying it again. We want to make sure that you have all that information in the NTEU system so we can have a direct contact with you. Even if you are terminated, we're still representing you, and we are still looking out for you. So please keep that in mind. So Bottom line, we're in court. We tried for an immediate injunction. Those are very hard to get. The
Yeah.
judge said no to that, but the judge is still hearing the case. It's still in the court, and it's not out of the question. We might get some relief sooner rather than later. So we do want you to know we're in court. We have not lost the case entirely. We just failed to get an immediate injunction, and that's something a judge will only do if they see irreparable harm. And we haven't been able to make that case yet, but we can certainly make the case that the administration has not followed the law, and that is where we're at now. Let's move on to this follow-up. We've been talking about this email people received on the fork in the road. It wasn't just the probationary employees; everybody got that. So, Duncan, what's going on with that, if anything? This offer for people to be paid through the end of September if they leave now.
Yeah, this is still up in the air. We're still not hearing much about it. What we do know is that folks who had expressed an interest in the fork in the road were sent a form out to see. Basically, it was almost like solidifying their interest, seeing if they're wanting to retire or resign, what date they would be looking at, things of that nature. So that came out approximately a week or so ago. We haven't heard anything since then. One of our fears was, and I think it's proven, when you hear these numbers, well, 40,000, 60,000, 75,000 people wanted to take the fork in the road offer. From our understanding and from what I've gotten from several pieces of anecdotal evidence, if you emailed a question to that OPM site, that HR at OPM site about the fork in the road, if you emailed a question, you were put on the resignation list. If you CC'd somebody like your supervisor, the supervisor was put on the list. A lot of people apparently, when they had their out of office reply on, that put them on the list because they responded to it and it had resign in the original body, so they had that. So we're not sure what the exact numbers are going to be once this finally rolls out, where people will have had, now the chance to do this, how soon that, this is going to come down, because it's going to come down from OPM to the agency. The agency is going to have to do their part then, and there will be contracts to basically an agreement / contract to sign, things like that. So it's still, if for those who opted for it, it's still out there. Don't know when or how it's going to move forward. But if you're saying now, oh man, I'm seeing what's happening with this and I want to get into the program, that program closed on February the 12th. So we're still hoping that those that did want to, make use of this program, as well as the Vera piece, where the voluntary early retirement, where I know that started to spark some interest with some people that either didn't quite have the age or didn't quite have, that piece that they're ready to retire, but they didn't quite have it under normal circumstances, and they volunteered for the Vera option, how that's going to play out. So it's still out there. We, of course, don't know how the legality of it, how you put people on admin leave for that long, how what's going to happen to it when we come up to, not having a budget. And we'll get into that in just a bit. Those types of factors. We're not sure how everything's going to play out, but it is still, what we're hearing is still active and slightly moving forward.
And we do need to make the point that people who are involved in the tax season, toll-free people at the processing centers, if they took the fork in the road, they still have to work through May 15th, correct?
That is what we've heard. Again, it's nothing official, but that is what we've heard. And I do want to go back for a second, and I thank you very much for bringing that up. We didn't have anybody that's in direct support, any probationary employees that are in direct support of the filing season were not let go yesterday. I am fully anticipating that sometime between April 15th and May 15th, that folks who are still in a probationary period who are now supporting the filing season will be let go as well on the probation. I do not think that they're going to stop with units like small business self-employment or appeals or large business LB&I. I think they're also going to be coming after what used to be called W&I is now called taxpayer services, but they're going to wait until after the filing season. So for those folks who are in a probationary status there, I would definitely be getting the resume ready for that as well, just in case.
So yes, I think that's very important. The fact that if you're a probationary employee and you've not been terminated and you're involved in tax filing or support of toll-free or taxpayer assistance centers, wherever you might be helping taxpayers, we don't know what's going to happen to you after April 15th. So you just need to be aware of that. You mentioned the budget. We are still on a continuing resolution, which ends in mid-March. It's creeping up on us right now. The House and Senate and the President, they're all talking about a budget for the rest of the fiscal year. There's no indication yet that there is a consensus that is beginning to emerge. So we don't know whether there will be a budget, even a temporary budget in place when March 14th comes around at midnight on that date. So I know you've been giving people messages that you should at least prepare for the possibility of a government shutdown. We certainly hope there won't be one on top of everything else we're dealing with. But Duncan, we just cannot rule that out at this point.
No, we absolutely can't. And I cannot urge strongly enough that folks, if you haven't already, make plans to have an emergency fund available, because we are just about 3 weeks away from this impasse hitting. And, right now in the House of Representatives, they have got a 2-vote margin for one party that's in control. And I don't think that they're going to be able to come to a consensus. You're seeing some things. Well, and what I was reading just this morning and seeing just this morning. Well, yeah, I want to go ahead and move forward with trying to see what we can get, but that's not necessarily the same as I want to vote for this particular budget on the things they've talked about, because they're talking about having to trim an awful lot of different things. So to have that and the Senate agree, and then something that'll be palatable to the administration to sign off on, is going to be very, very interesting. And I think it's going to be a very tough thing to do. So I would anticipate, and I would hope it's not going to be a repeat of something like we had for the, I believe it was 17, where we had the 35-day shutdown, but it could be quite lengthy. And I want to make sure that people are prepared for that. I'm a hope for the best, plan for the worst type of guy. And in this case, I want to make sure people are aware of what could happen. I don't want anybody to be surprised that if they come to a deal at the last minute, that's at least decent for the agencies, especially the agencies that deal with taxpayers and can help them, that's good. But if they're, going to be, cutting people to the bone and not providing the service that the American taxpayers need and the American public needs, then, I hope they don't come to an agreement, because a bad agreement is not is not something that we need. We need something that is going to take care of the needs of the American taxpayer, and not just, okay, we'll come to a deal just to come to a deal. So I just want everybody to be prepared and ready if the eventuality comes in about 3 weeks.
And there's another aspect of this, Duncan, because in past government shutdowns, just a small handful of IRS employees were required to work, almost nobody. However, now that we're in the tax filing season, if there is a government shutdown in the middle of the tax filing season, I think there's a lot of concern right now that, we will be required to work in places like toll-free and taxpayer assistance centers, even if we are not being paid.
And that's an excellent point. And, something that our vice president here and chief steward has brought up to me. Well, if we have to go into the office and we're not getting paid, we're accepted employees. So that means we're going to get paid. We have to work during the shutdown. We'll get paid after the shutdown ends, according to federal law, but we don't have any money right now. How are we going to do things like put gas in our vehicles to be able to come to work? And it's a tough thing to manage for folks. And again, that's why I say have that emergency fund ready so you're ready for those types of eventualities.
Well, another eventuality we're looking at deals with the possibility of some kind of return to office. As we have mentioned here, and as our national president, Doreen Greenwald, has made very clear on her appearances she's made on our podcast, that we have a contract that we believe is legally enforceable for telework. And that if you have a telework agreement, you're abiding by that, that the management has a responsibility to abide by that, and the government as a whole has a responsibility to abide by that. We've been hearing rumors and I don't know if we call them rumors, just information that seeps out and leaks out of government, that there will be an effort to try to legally cancel union contracts. We don't think that can be done legally. As of now, your telework agreements are in place. You should be able to use them. But Duncan, the rumors continue. What, if anything, do we know about telework and any order that may come down for return to office?
Yeah, that's the thing. When you're talking about, you're exactly right. Knowing is different than what we're hearing. And I'm hearing several different things that they are going to try. And again, I am not placing the blame on this on IRS. If this was an IRS issue where IRS officials were doing this willingly and wanting to go forward, I would be blasting them to kingdom come. But everything that I'm hearing and seeing, this is coming from on high. And like you said, there are certain parts of the administration that are saying, well, we can just cancel union contracts. Legally, you cannot. Legally, we have negotiated over the telework agreement. This has gone on for many, many years. We, had a reopener this past summer, and this was not brought up to change the telework agreement. So our telework agreement remains in force. We're very confident that any court will see that this is a legally binding contract that both parties willingly agreed to. So do we think we will prevail in court? Absolutely. Will that be necessarily a quick process? No, and that's the problem. When you compound the fact that, they will try and delay and delay and delay, so in the meantime, while people are, we're in court trying to make sure that our contract is being enforced, people will have to follow the order to go return to the office. That's our fear. And in a lot of offices across the country, and we have a few here in Indiana, there are not enough places to sit for the bodies that will be required to come in. And we have not had any answer on that. And I know that's part of the discussions that, from what I'm hearing from sources that are being held right now, is are we going to do a gradual return to office while we find, figure out where we're going to put people? If somebody already has a desk, are we going to bring them in? If we don't have enough desks in a POD, how are we going to do that? And what are they going to do for the folks who have been working remotely that don't really have any office? I'm hearing they're going to have to find a POD within 50 miles of their current location, which might mean that they're going to have to give up some locality pay. That's a possibility. There are so many different moving parts to this that would be upsetting the apple cart, so to speak, if this is forced to us against our agreement. So again, we're wanting people to be prepared to hear these types of things. And I don't want anybody to get upset and do anything that would cause them to be charged with insubordination. We do not want that. But if you're given an order to do something, tell them you want it in writing. Get it in writing. If they will not give it to you in writing, then we're looking at it as, if there's not a witness, then where is the order? If there is a witness and they still don't want to put it in writing, you email them saying, am I understanding correctly? You are ordering me as my manager to do X or Y. That way you've got something in writing covering yourself, so the management official can either come back and say, no, that's not the correct understanding, or no. And when they say, do not send me emails, I don't want to discuss this in emails, I only want to talk about it verbally, that's about as big as a red flag as an NFL challenge. You never ever want to, you never should hear that from a manager that, if they're scared to put something in writing, something is definitely going wrong and does need a replay challenge on that. So make sure you get that in writing.
Yeah, first of all, asking for it in writing is a perfectly reasonable request to make. That is the first thing you want to say. The second thing is if any manager says, well, no, I'm not going to put it in writing, I think your advice is excellent. Put everything, take notes on your discussion, put that into an email, send that to your manager and say, I understand you are ordering me the following, and send it to them. And you've got that on record. If they respond, you know, get that, printed off as soon as you can or preserved in some way that you can go back and check it later. A hard print is always the best idea. And even if you don't get a response, you at least have record that you sent that to your manager. That's your understanding of the order. And that's a very valuable thing to have if NTEU has to go back in later. So bottom line,
No,
Duncan, is
let me ask
go
you a
ahead,
question
please.
on that line. You were a union steward and then a manager for the last part of your career. You went to the dark side. You went to management. But you were a good manager because you understood, both sides of it. You wanted to make sure that the programs got delivered. You want to do this. If an employee came to you and said, can you put that in writing? Would you have ever had any problem in putting in writing something that you were giving to them verbally?
Oh, no, but not at all. I would not. And actually, I have known very few cases where an IRS manager would refuse to do that. I've heard it happening in other parts of the country, and that was the tactic those chapters used, was sending the email with a summary of what the employee's understanding was. And what normally happened was a lot of backtracking by the management after that happened. So that's been the experience. In Indiana, I never saw that. The managers that I knew, even when I was in field assistance, when we ran the taxpayer assistance centers, and I know of no managers that would refuse to do that. No, never found a case of it really, that I was aware of the managers that I knew in that operation. We had no problem. We're going to give you an order. We'll put it in writing if you want it. Normally we would anyway, but if you want it in writing and it's not, well, I would give it to you. So no, that's a perfectly reasonable request. If you're getting a legal order, asking for it in writing, there's nothing at all unreasonable about that. And you need to document that fact that you asked for it and didn't get it. NTEU would obviously want to have that. But I don't, I listen to Indiana. Of course, I know people watch and listen from all over the country, but this podcast. So just be aware of what may be happening locally. I can't speak for all managers, but I'll speak for myself on that one. So again, we believe our contract is legally enforceable. We will enforce it. If you get a direct order, get it documented, let your local chapter know about that. We'll take it from there, but don't disobey a direct order. We don't want anybody being accused of being insubordinate. Correct?
Absolutely. Yep. That's great to sum up. And I asked you that question just because I wanted, a real world answer from somebody who's been there and done that. So, and people listen to this podcast. Why people listen to this podcast outside the service or outside of the country? I think this is good advice for any employee that has a dealing with a manager is to always, when you have managers that tell you, don't put that in writing or, don't send me emails or something like that. That is absolutely a red flag, whether you're in the service, whether you're in the federal government or anything else. That's bad juju right there.
Okay, Duncan, time for our final comments. I'll let you go first.
Okay. Again, this has been a really tough time for all of us in the service with what's been going on. And people are naturally apprehensive about what's going to happen next, what's going to hit next. My main message to the folks out there watching and listening today is NTU is here for you. We're fighting. We're going to continue to fight. NTU is a very strong union. NTU has great attorneys, very good legal minds. We know where the case law is. We know what should be done. We know what shouldn't be done. And we're going to continue to press that in every avenue that we have. Be it in the courts, be it in you know, federal government, whether it be Merit System Protection Board, things of that nature. We're going to be there doing what we need to do for you. Don't ever think for a minute that NTU is not. And if you're watching this and you're not an NTU member, at this point, I've got to ask you why the hell you aren't. Because there's no reason to, because nobody else is fighting for employees right now in the service. I mean, we're it. Your managers will do what they can, but a lot of times they're going to be powerless from those up above. The folks that are fighting for you are your local NTU chapters and national NTEU, and they're going to be continue to be pressing this fight for however long it takes to make sure that that right prevails is the best way I can phrase it.
You know, Duncan, when all this started happening, the first question I asked myself was, we all know how we feel about it, but how does the public feel about it? Well, we now have some data on that. There's a Washington Post Ipsos poll that was conducted February 13th to the 18th, so it's fairly recent. That poll shows almost 6 in 10 Americans say they oppose laying off large numbers of federal government workers. And they also, by that same margin, oppose making it easier to fire longtime government employees. So, bottom line is, a large part of the public is with us on this. And my view, Duncan, is that once we see a deterioration of government services, and we will see that if
Yep.
this continues, as we see this deterioration of government services, I believe that more and more the public will be on our side when they can't get VA benefits, when the Social Security benefits are a mess, when they can't deal with IRS. I think that, you know, one group of people, Duncan, upset about this. I was talking to somebody the other day, are the people in the accounting firms.
Mm-hmm.
They got to deal with IRS. They've got to deal with IRS people on audits. Some people are in the middle of audits with these probationary employees that are being let go. They're going to have to give that to somebody else. They don't know who to talk to, who to call. Can't get a call back.
Right.
Can't work with the service to get a case settled. And because we don't have enough people to take care of the audits that are even going on right now. So, I mean, there are going to be many impacts on many segments of the economy. And once it becomes clear to the public, I think more and more the public is going to say, you know,
Mm-hmm.
we do want the government to work. We really do depend on you for a number of things. And those government workers were working and they were doing the work for you, the public. So that's my message. Duncan, thank you again. We will be back next week. As far as we know, we'll be back next week with another Chapter 49 podcast. They can terminate probationary employees, but they don't have the power to terminate this podcast. So we will still be back next week. We'll even, if something big happens, we might even jump on for an emergency podcast. We've only done that a couple of times, so hopefully we won't have to do something like that. But we thank you very much for watching and listening. If you know somebody who might get something out of this podcast, send the link to other people. We appreciate the fact that a lot of you have done that, and we will continue to try to put a product out that is something that you can use and some information we think is going to be important to you. So with that in mind, thanks again for watching and listening. Please be safe and be kind.